and I'm here to talk to you in the next 10 to 11 minutes about LGBTQ stressors and their relationship to substance use and depression. So, I came from Bowen theory. Now I know lots of you in here were like, no Bowen, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. I focused on differentiation in particular. So this comments on one's balance between a sense of self and a sense of self in others. So in other words, one's tolerance for autonomy and tolerance for intimacy. So those with high differentiation have this balance, and it matches their cultural view. So sometimes people critique it so that, you know, some cultures have a little bit more towards their relationships importance, and I think if it matches your cultural standpoint, then it works for you, that balance. Now, when there's a drastic imbalance of these two, in order to manage anxiety that stems from relationships, those with low differentiation are more likely to emotionally cut off or be emotionally reactive. And I'll describe those two terms right now. So to emotionally cut off, if you're maybe in a highly anxious relationship with someone, you're talking, you're more likely to shut down the relationship or shut down the conversation and walk away, or cut off that relationship entirely. Or if you're emotionally reactive, you may have this, you know, if we relate to emotions sort of taking over where we can't think anymore, we kind of maybe dissociate or start to attack or defend and shut down any kind of dialogue between two people. So I know that some people think emotional reactivity means that emotions are bad. That's not at all what that means. It just means that emotional reactivity to the point that we can no longer discuss with someone else. Okay. So the LGBTQ population is a population of sexual minorities, right? So those who have non-heterosexual attractions or behaviors, and who may or may not label themselves as such. So lesbian, gay, bisexual, pansexual, etc. And those that do not identify with the gender they were assigned at birth. So those that were transgender or gender fluid, gender neutral. And then those who were born with typical male sex characteristics and typical female sex characteristics. So sometimes people have XY chromosomes, but were born with a vagina. So, and those people are intersex. So I collected a population across all of those different definitions. Okay, so minority stress theory states that LGBTQ individuals experience a unique form of stress, and this stems from their social environments, particularly those that have a heterosexist culture. And some of these stressors may include perceiving or directly experiencing discrimination or prejudice, as well as any factors relating to the coming out process or internalized homonegativity, so having negative beliefs about yourself because of your LGBTQ identity. All right, and we see tons of literature on accelerated rates of substance use, suicide ideation, and depression in the literature with both adolescents and adults. Those are just like just a range of percentages I've seen across studies that are reported. Okay, so my research questions are, so what are the relationships between LGBTQ stressors and alcohol use, marijuana use, and depressive symptoms? And when these relationships exist, how can differentiation in the form of cutoff, reactivity, and our view of separateness and connectedness with our mom and dad, how can those serve as mediators? So I had a pretty kind of diverse sample when it comes to sexual orientation labels. So about 48% or 47% of individuals identified as gay males. And then another third identifies bisexual or pansexual. And then I had some lesbians, some asexual, demisexual, and some folks who identified as heteroflexible or identified as heterosexual but had non-heterosexual sexual attractions and behaviors. So I did include them here. I didn't have any transgender folks, which really bummed me out. But I did get some folks who identify as gender fluid and gender neutral, and I did have a few participants who identified as intersex. Sort of interestingly, all of them were raised female. Okay. Unfortunately, I didn't really have a diverse sample when it came to racial ethnic identity, 75% of the sample identified as white or European American, and then then the last 25% identify as black, and I apologize for the Hispanic Latino convergence here. It should be separated or noted differently, but 15% there, and then only 3 individuals were bi or multiracial, which is sad for me because I'm a biracial bisexual person, and I would like that to be represented a little bit more. Oh yeah, and then the average age was about 28, 29 years old. Okay, so my measures, I measured depressive symptoms with a PHQ-9, I measured alcohol use with audit, and yeah, cool. And marijuana use with the DFAC. They all had really great reliability, which was nice. And then I measured LGBTQ stressors in 3 variables that came from Balsam's Daily Heterosexist Experiences questionnaire, and I was particularly interested in family of origin stressors, so when your family is not accepting of your LGBTQ identity or do not approve of your romantic partner, and then vicarious stressors, so maybe you're not directly experiencing the stress, but those around you are, and you're experiencing stress just from that, not just, but from that. And then I had general variable that included the rest of the subscale as a part of the measure. And then I measured differentiation through the emotional cutoff and regulation subscales of the DSI. And then I used the FDR to measure their view of separateness and connectedness to mom and dad through the FDR, which is made by Suzanne Bartle-Herring, who's my advisor. Okay, so I use structural equation modeling to check out all of these relationships, and I used, because of the small sample size, which was 109, I sort of found the simplest models that had the best fit, and that's what I'm going to present today. No latent variables were used, unfortunately. That will be done in the future. All right, so this first one is looking at depressive symptoms. So I actually found that, so let me just describe this. So this was just the official variable I used, and it was sex at birth. So it was if you're born male at birth, and then also sex raised as, so if you're an intersex individual and were raised as female, then you're counted as female. If I have a more diverse sample in the future, I want to have them in their own category to look at that. But we saw that those born male actually had higher cutoff scores, which related to higher depressive symptoms. Also, interestingly, those born male had a higher connectedness with mom, but that led to higher depressive scores. That's kind of weird, but when you look at the FDR mom scores, it was more likely that those that reported high connectedness to mom were really connected. So if you know Bowen, that hints at fusion. So that kind of makes that seem a little bit more makes sense there. And then for vicarious stressors, you see that the more vicarious stressors individuals had, the more that related to like higher connectedness to dad, and then higher connectedness with dad related to lower depressive symptoms, and then the more vicarious stressors you had, that related to more emotional reactivity, which related to higher depressive symptoms, which also makes sense. And when you think about, or when I looked at the FDR scores for dad, it was more likely that they had either really low separateness with dad or a more, what Bowen would say as a balance with dad between separateness and connectedness. So no one was really super fused with dad, which I found interesting. Okay, for alcohol use, we see the same thing with males, so emotional cutoff and connectedness with mom mediating that with alcohol use. Nothing mediated the general stressors variable, which I think is interesting. Family of origin was only partially mediated by connectedness with mom, and vicarious stressors was also mediated by connectedness with mom. So higher vicarious stressors, higher connectedness with mom, higher alcohol use. Okay, marijuana was weird. Marijuana was really funky. Males had higher marijuana use, or born as male, or higher marijuana use, And actually mom, when mediated, higher connectedness with mom related to less marijuana use. So you can see connectedness with mom is doing something totally different with marijuana than she did with alcohol use or depressive symptoms. And then you see the general stressors is also mediated, partially mediated by mom, family of origin as well. And vicarious stressors were partially mediated by emotional reactivity, and holy crap. So it shows that, yes, stressors are related to substance use and depressive symptoms, but in totally different ways. Differentiation as a mediator, and I put possible protective factor because I did not use moderation analyses, but these mediations suggest that I should to see if differentiation can serve as a protective factor. And also relationships with mom and dad may protect or amplify, that should say aid. And also it suggests that I should do more moderation, or do them at all, moderation analyses with mom, because they do serve different roles when it comes to mediation. And that has small sample size. A bot ran through my data. If you want to ask me about it, we're about to have questions. I did not include betrayal trauma, which I originally wanted to, but because of the sample size, I couldn't have that complex of a model, so I want to include that in the future. And I do not include any latent variables, so all of these are observed when really they should be latent variables. Whew. All right, sweet, all right, awesome. Okay, please come with the questions. Awesome, yes?
What's demisexual?
Okay, so demisexual, I would say, is like a form of asexual.